Good evening. I declare the agenda briefing forum of the 21st of May 2024 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:30 p.m. Welcome councillors and staff and members of the public. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people and recognise their cultural connection to this land. This evening we've got Councillor Burns as a potential apology. He may be late, he may be a complete apology, but for the time being we've got the remaining councillors present and the Mayor. We've got the usual executive leadership team here except for an Acting Director of Development Services, so thank you Fleur, and we'll announce the remaining staff members as and when needed as we work through the agenda. Okay, Councillor Jones is on a leave of absence, but due to some circumstances which we won't go into, he's back this weekend for the OCM, as I understand it. Okay, so any disclosures of interest this evening? Councillor Johnston.
Yes, I'm disclosing a proximity interest to own a property within the proposed Park Street Heritage Area, item C2.
Excellent. Any other disclosures? Good, we'll move through. There's no approved deputations. I will save any announcements for next week and we'll move straight into the officer reports. I'll begin by taking questions on item C1, the drafted amended local planning policy for bicycle parking and end of trip facilities. Any questions on C1, councillors? Good. C2, the proposed Park Street Heritage Area, consideration post advertising. You don't specifically need to leave, Councillor Johnston. Look, it might be moot if there's little to no questions this week. We can have a bit of a talk offline about whether there's a need next week. Any questions on C2? Councillor White. It is better this week. Sorry,
just going to check we're on the right one.
Okay, yeah. Look, I've just had...
I do have a question.
Sorry, I'll just cut you off, Councillor White. Even though it's not a meeting, because it's a proximity interest, we'll err on the side of caution and ask you to leave. So that's my error. Councillor White.
Thank you. In the staff responses to comments of concern about the proposal, it suggested that research concludes heritage listings do not negatively affect property values. What research is that?
Acting Director of Development Services, did you want to take the question or refer it?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, we'll refer that to Acting Manager Planning Services.
Through you, Mayor. So there has been a lot of work done with the Heritage Council of WA into the impact on property values through heritage listings. So we're happy to provide some further examples as well. But yeah, there has been a lot of work in this space and educating the public that it doesn't necessarily have an adverse or impact on property values, which is a common misconception. But we can provide some further detail on that.
Thank you. Any other questions on C2? Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, just I'm assuming that all of these, through you, Mayor, all of these heritage listed properties are people who want to be, properties that have nominated, or is it been selected by council? Sorry.
Okay, I'll seek an answer from the acting manager on that as well.
Through you, Mayor. So through the consultation that was conducted for this, so there's 85% of respondents indicated they value the heritage and character of the area as well. So there was quite a strong uptake in terms of positive feedback, and a lot of the public were receptive to this proposal. So there has been that positive sentiment which has come through that early consultation conducted for this proposed heritage area.
I mean, for absolute clarity, we could probably refer you to the officer report, Councillor De Vries. Yeah.
That's fine.
There is a table there. It's table 1, 5 for, 3 against, 1 comment only. Any other questions on C2? Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Just in terms of maintenance costs, could you expand a little bit about what like-for-like replacements are? Could somebody expand on that?
Acting Manager will refer that one to you as well.
Through you, Mayor. So we have a local planning policy 7.7, which provides the definition of maintenance repair. So I'll just quickly read through some of the typical maintenance and repair works that are referenced in the policy. So, for example, it includes painting of existing painted surfaces, rendering, re-roofing like-for-like materials, no change to the roof form and pitch, and replacement of cladding materials with like-for-like. So there is clarity provided in an existing planning policy for that.
Follow-up questions, Councillor O'Connor? Any final questions on C2? We'll move on to C3, Heritage Grant applications. And if someone could ask Councillor Johnston to join us again, that'd be great. We'll just give them both a sec. Excellent. We're taking questions on C3, grant applications. Any questions, councillors? Okay, we'll move on to C4, standardised meeting procedures consultation. Councillor De Vries.
I sent through 2 questions, which unfortunately I don't have in front of me, but I think one was relating to the change that questions can be asked at meeting times by the public without public notice. That was one question, and obviously that's a change that seems to be in the wind. And the other one was about asking questions during OCMs, which, I mean, I believe that we can continue to do, but can I just have some clarity around what the restrictions on that might be, since that seems to be something that's being discouraged in the new standard meeting procedures? Thank you.
Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. So the first question was regarding public participation in council meetings, and particularly around the ability for members of the public to ask questions without notice at public question time. So that is a proposed change under the proposed reforms to the standardised meeting procedures. At the moment here at the city, we do require notice for public questions. However, many local governments already do not require notice. It doesn't mean that we can't, for example, encourage members of the public to provide notice when they ask us questions, so that we do have more time to prepare and give them a well-informed response. And we also do still have we would, under the proposal, still have the ability to take questions on notice and return an answer to the next council meeting. So we didn't feel a need to comment particularly on that proposed change. Shall I continue with answering the second question? Yep. So the second question was around, I believe, the proposed meeting procedures. They're introducing a new agenda item for elected member questions at the beginning of the meeting. At present, we encourage elected members to ask to get as many questions out as they can prior to the meeting. Agenda briefing forum, as we are all here today, is a really good opportunity for elected members to get out their questions in advance of the council meeting, and that gives us good time to make sure that you have all of the information that you need. It gives you a week to make sure that you're able to digest the answers to our questions. It's certainly not to say that we think that elected members asking questions at OCM is a bad idea. In fact, if new information comes to light or something comes to hand during the debate, which means that a question of officers is appropriate, then of course that question should be asked. I guess that our comment was partially reflective. If the meeting procedures are meant to discourage procedures such as agenda briefing forum and have all elected member questions on the night of the council meeting, that wouldn't be very practical, and it would be appropriate to have a time limit, or else all council meetings would probably go over time.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Just a follow-up question on that. So is it envisaged that there would still be the capacity for elected members to ask a question once the debate had started? Because occasionally that does happen, that something during the debate raises a question. So it's not intending that all of the questions would be front-loaded at the beginning of the meeting?
Yep, through you, presiding member. So that's right, that is an open question as to whether the proposed meeting procedures will allow for that. One of the comments that we've provided in our feedback is that it's difficult to comment fully on the proposed meeting procedures until we see what they actually look like. And that would be one of many details that's not currently apparent around, will elected members still be able to ask questions during debate items? I would assume that they would, but we don't have enough information to answer that yet.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor. I've looked at part 3, the conduct of the debate, and I have a concern about, I think it's point 6, that empowers the presiding member to call a person to order, and should that member not comply with a third call to order, the presiding member may direct them to speak no further, but they may continue to cast their vote for the remainder of the meeting, with failure to adhere to the direction being a minor breach. Now, I can understand if it was speaking during that item, but to me, for the remainder of the meeting, I can't see how that's going to work very well if somebody wants to, if this person is going to move an item and they're not allowed to speak to it, or if they're going to second an item, not allowed to speak to it, if they have an elected member's motion and they're not allowed to speak to it. So I'd like staff advice on how that might actually work.
Director Corporate Services.
Thanks, and through you, presiding member. And yes, when you raised this with me earlier, Councillor Power, I think that your thoughts resonated in terms of perhaps there should be discretion for the presiding member to just disallow that member to speak for the remainder of the agenda item rather than for the whole meeting. And it's unclear as to whether there would be that level of discretion. So it's certainly something, if you wanted us to add something to to our response to the consultation paper, you would certainly be welcome to put forward an amendment in that respect.
Thank you. Look, just further on that, it appears as if a procedural motion that achieves the same effect as this appears to be trying to gain is being dropped from the procedural motions, that a member no longer be allowed to speak. And I note that the staff have actually said, well, that it would be better if it was if that was there, and that because that allows the whole council to make that decision rather than the presiding member. So it falls on all of us. So I suppose what I'm asking with this is, would it be better if I am looking at an amendment to try and say, well, we should drop that entirely, the point 3, and just resume what was the former thing of the procedural motion that stops somebody continuing to speak on a subject.
What's the staff view, Director, Corporate Services?
Through you, presiding member. So that would be one way of dealing with it. And currently we have incorporated feedback from officers to say that, well, compared to our current meeting procedures, our current meeting procedure local law, and that's just the meeting procedure local law for the City of Subiaco, we do have a procedural motion that a member no longer be heard on a matter. And that's not a procedural motion that has been proposed under the new standardised meeting procedures. So we put it in the feedback that should be considered. We haven't gone so far as to say that should be the only mechanism, and I would have to think about that further, because currently the procedures provide that the presiding member may disallow a member to speak, and so I need to consider that further in terms of whether that ability should be removed or not in the officer's view. But certainly having a procedural motion to allow any member to put forward a motion that a member no longer be heard seems to make sense.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you. And Mayor, just to be clear, this is no reflection at all on you as a presiding officer. It's about trying to get the meeting procedures in a proper form. Look, the other one that I was going to refer to was that a motion to refer to a committee or the CEO to provide new or an updated report to a future meeting. Now, I think we have been in the difficulty of this before, that when there is not an appropriate committee to refer a matter to, that we've run into trouble, trying to get it to a workshop. Now, perhaps saying that it be referred to the CEO to provide a new or updated report would achieve that aim. But what I'm wondering is whether we should have broaden that a little bit if we can, and say, a motion to a committee or the CEO or a workshop, so that we're quite clear that, these are our options.
Director Corporate Services.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, I'm just trying to go back in my memory as to what the proposed meeting procedures say, and I'm guessing that it doesn't. It has something around being able to defer a decision to a committee. Council always has the ability to delegate something further to. I'd have to think that through. One thing that we do at present is, for example, take away items to a workshop. The question is whether you want to delegate any power to a committee to do anything, and whether that should be allowed for. Probably need to take it on notice in terms of the mechanics of how that would work if we don't have such a committee. Welcome any other thoughts?
I suppose you could prescribe something, but I think the matter is dealt with by handing it back to the CEO. So the CEO can work with elected members as to how it's best to be to a workshop, etc. So the problem with prescribing something in model, in standard meeting procedures would be that you're describing something that's not described anywhere. So some local governments might call a strategic workshop or other types of forms of ways in which it could be dealt with. So I suppose the meeting procedures is trying to deal with committees and council in terms of how those matters are dealt with at those particular meetings. So I think the fact that you refer it back to the CEO ordinarily would mean that the CEO would then organise a strategic workshop for that matter. So.
Other questions on C4? Okay, the final public agenda item would be C5, financial statements and reports for the month ending 30 April. No questions. Okay, that will bring us to the end of the public agenda items for this evening. Next week there'll be at least 2 confidential items which we'll vote to go behind closed doors on and duly consider, but for the time being I'll call the agenda briefing forum to a close. So I declare it closed at 5:49 p.m. Thank you, everyone.